It was just after 6 when I pulled into the driveway the way I had every Friday for the past 3 years. I always brought something simple: bread, sometimes a pie. Tonight, it was roasted carrots and my apple butter still warm in the jar. Rachel opened the door, but didn't step aside. Her hand rested on the frame like a barrier. "Tonight's not ideal," she said. "Daniel's entertaining clients. It might be uncomfortable for you." I blinked the Tupperware warm against my fingers. "Oh," I said. "I didn't know." She gave a soft shrug as if the schedule had changed on its own. "We didn't want to make a big deal." "Next week, okay," I nodded. I didn't know what else to do. She shut the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Back in the car, I sat for a moment. The porch light flickered on behind me. Through the window, I could see the dining table wine glasses, candles, a charcuterie board I hadn't made. Someone laughed sharp and free. I backed out slowly, making sure not to hit the hedge I'd trimmed last spring. At home, I left the carrots in the fridge and put the apple butter on the counter. I didn't feel like eating. I didn't feel like watching anything either, so I just sat in the kitchen with my hands folded, the silence folding around me like fabric that used to be soft. The knock never came. No one called. At 7:43, my phone buzzed. A Venmo request. From Rachel, $32.49. Note: groceries for Mom. I stared at it for a long time. Then I clicked decline and turned off my phone. It was a week later when I noticed the thermostat blinking. The display showed the temperature 62 degrees, and just below it, a word I'd never seen before: locked. I pressed the up arrow. Nothing happened. I pressed it again. Still nothing. That afternoon, I called Daniel. He stopped by after work, still in his shirt and tie, a takeout cup in hand. Rachel came too, trailing behind, eyes on her phone. "It's just a setting," he said, tapping a few buttons. "I put a code on it." "Keeps the system efficient." "Efficient," I repeated. "It's winter, Mom. Heating a whole house to 72 all day. That's not practical." He gave a light laugh like I'd asked something silly. "I've lived here for 22 years, I said quietly. "I never needed a passcode before." Rachel looked up. "You're retired now. Maybe it's time to live more modestly." Neither of them looked at me after that. Daniel was already walking back toward the door. Rachel tapped her phone and said something about grocery points. I watched them leave from the hallway, the same hallway where I stood the day Daniel brought home his first science fair ribbon, the one I painted before the baby came, the one I cleaned after Thomas's stroke. I had given them the down payment for their first house. I paid part of the IVF when their insurance wouldn't cover the last cycle. I'd spent Christmases alone so they could travel. I never asked for a cent back. And now my heat had a password. That night I slept in socks and a second sweater. I boiled water for tea just to hold something warm. My fingers ached from cold, but the ache inside my chest lingered longer. The next day, Ruth waved from her porch. I tried to smile back, but it didn't quite reach. Ruth came by with cinnamon rolls and 2 mismatched mugs. We sat in her kitchen, warm and always smelling faintly of nutmeg. She asked if I'd been feeling all right. I said yes, though it came out flat. She hesitated, then said, "Saw Rachel the other day. At that new spa by the river, full robe and slippers. Looked like she'd been there for hours." I blinked. On a weekday? She said something about needing to recharge. Looked plenty recharged to me. After I got home, I opened my laptop. I hadn't checked my online banking in a while. Everything was automated, stable. But something about the way Ruth said it so offhand, so sure, made me feel cold in a different way. The emergency credit line was nearly at its limit. I scrolled. Spa charges, airfare to Scottsdale, car repairs, a charge from a boutique hotel I'd never heard of. It was all in my name. The card hadn't been used in months until suddenly it had been. Repeatedly. I called the bank. The woman on the line was polite but firm. "There's a medical note attached to your file. It limits transaction alerts and access. It says a family member requested oversight for your protection. My mouth felt dry. Who added that? Your son Daniel. He submitted a form citing early cognitive concerns. We followed standard protocol. It's not uncommon. I thanked her and hung up. The clock ticked in the kitchen. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past. I sat in the same chair where I used to sort school permission slips and birthday invitations. I stared at the screen, my name at the top of the account, but not really mine anymore. They'd rewritten me on paper, reduced me to a line item that needed managing. The kettle clicked off behind me, forgotten. Upstairs, I opened the hallway closet. I moved aside the coats and found the green folder Thomas had labeled years ago, back when he still balanced everything, in block letters, if ever needed. I set the green folder on the dining table the way Thomas used to, square to the edge, as if lining up the paper somehow kept the world steady. The label was faded now, the ink softened by years if ever needed. He'd written it during a winter when his hands were already shaking, but his mind was sharp enough to plan for a future he feared I'd face alone. Inside were documents I hadn't touched in years. My original trust agreement. Property records. Copies of accounts Thomas opened using my maiden name. Small, quiet pockets of security he never told anyone else about. I remembered asking him once why he kept them separate. He'd smiled and said insurance against the wrong kind of dependence. I didn't understand it then. I do now. Daniel and Rachel had never asked about any of my savings. They only ever asked about what I could give, what I could cover, what they could shift onto me without calling it that. It hadn't occurred to them I might have something they didn't already count as theirs. I made tea but forgot to drink it. Instead, I sat with the documents spread before me, tracing the edges like old scars. My name appeared over and over Calamaran in ink that remembered me better than my own son did. I picked up the phone and called Lynette Hayes, an old friend who practiced law before she retired. She answered on the second ring, her voice still brisk, still sure. When I told her what happened, she didn't gasp or scold. She simply said, "Come by tomorrow. Bring everything. We'll sort this out." After we hung up, I didn't cry. The tears had gone somewhere else, somewhere quieter and deeper than even I could reach. So I took out a notepad. I wrote down what I knew, what I suspected, and what needed changing. A list of lines drawn in pencil for years, finally ready for ink. When I finished, the house felt steady again, as if it had been waiting for me to catch up. In the morning, I slid the folder into my bag and locked the door behind me. Lynette greeted me at her home office with firm hands and sharper eyes than most women half her age. She'd cleared the dining table for the documents. I laid out the folder and the notebook I'd filled the night before. She read in silence, only pausing to make notes with a blue pen that clicked like a metronome. "They've gone too far," she said at last, tapping the copy of the power of attorney Daniel filed 5 years ago, back when I had shingles and couldn't drive for a month. "You never signed full authority," she said. "Only medical access. That's a very different thing. We drafted a revocation notice right then. She notarized it on the spot. By noon, I had opened a new checking account under my full legal name. Lynette helped me reroute my pension deposits and flagged the credit line for fraudulent use, citing elder financial abuse. She didn't use the word lightly, and neither did I. We set up alerts. Any new attempt to access my accounts would trigger legal review. No one could speak for me anymore, not without my voice. I took a cab home. The air outside felt lighter, or maybe I just did. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table and made one final decision. I pulled out the card Rachel used for shared groceries and held it for a moment. They never asked if I wanted to contribute. They just expected it. I opened the banking app and closed the card with 3 taps. No notice, no message. Just a quiet end to a long line of unspoken yeses. I shredded the plastic and dropped it in the kitchen bin. Then I made tea just for me and sat by the window, while the sun dipped behind the fence, knowing full well what silence can hold. The next morning, I folded laundry and listened to the birds outside the open window. The phone rang once, but I didn't answer. The first ping came from Rachel just before noon. A one-line text, no greeting. Why did my Amazon payment fail? I didn't reply. By 5, there were 4 more. Target, Instacart, something called Sunglow Retreats, all bounced. At 7:30, Daniel's name lit up the screen. I didn't answer that either. A voicemail followed, clipped and forced. Hey, Mom, something weird's going on with the cards. Can you call me when you get this? I was folding towels when the knock came. Hard, quick, familiar. I opened the door. Daniel stood there still in his work clothes tie, loosened face red. Something wrong with your account? He asked. Everything froze. My card got declined at dinner. He was trying to stay calm, but his jaw twitched the way it used to when he didn't win at chess as a kid. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I stepped aside, walked to the hallway table, and retrieved a plain white envelope. Here, I said, holding it out. This should clear things up. He opened it right there on the porch. 3 pages. A bank statement, closed access notice, my full signature. Final balance 0. I moved everything I said gently. Your name's not attached anymore. He blinked. Why would you? I didn't sign up to be your wallet, Daniel. He looked stunned. Like I'd changed the rules of a game he didn't realize had a rule book. Mom, we needed that line. Rachel's between contracts and I shook my head. I needed heat. I needed respect. You chose where the money went. Now I'm choosing where it stops. He didn't speak. Just stood there with the envelope still in his hand, the last of his control printed in black and white. Is there anything else? I asked, quieter now. He stepped back like the ground shifted beneath him. No, he said finally, and turned without another word. As I closed the door behind him, I saw Rachel's car parked across the street, headlights off. The next morning, she came alone. Rachel showed up just after 10, holding a small paper bag with tissue sticking out the top. She wasn't dressed like usual. No heels, no sharp lines. Just flats, an oversized cardigan, and her wedding ring turned inward. I thought I'd stop by, she said, eyes flicking toward the house like it might bite. We've all had a rough few months. I figured maybe we could reset. I opened the door and let her in. She handed me the bag, a candle. Lavender and cedar or something close enough. Thank you, I said, setting it on the table without unwrapping it further. Tea. She nodded. I poured 2 cups and placed them between us, but she didn't touch hers. I didn't sit yet. Instead, I walked to the drawer and took out my notebook. I have a question for you, Rachel, she straightened. Do you know how much of my money you spent over the last 3 years? Her lips parted slightly, but nothing came out. I opened the notebook. 118 transactions, I said, not including recurring charges. I read them out loud calmly like a ledger. Dog boarding while you were in Napa. 3 tire replacements on a car that's not mine. Monthly wine subscriptions. Your ring upgrade platinum, not gold. Groceries from 2 states away while you were on a work trip. Her eyes narrowed at that last one, but she still didn't speak. I closed the notebook softly. You never asked if it was all right. You just attached the card and smiled when it went through. She stood then, slowly, as if her chair had cooled beneath her. I thought it was understood, she said flatly. We're family. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I only looked at the tea between us, hers untouched, mine cooling. She left without finishing the sentence, without picking up the gift bag, without looking back. After the door closed, I poured both cups down the sink. Ruth brought over muffins that were too dry and tea that was too strong, but I didn't say a word. We sat in the patch of garden between our houses, the late light catching on the stubborn soil where we'd tried to grow lavender last spring. I still think we planted it too close to the fence, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. No, I replied, smiling. It just didn't want to grow in a place it didn't belong. She laughed and I joined her. It felt good, true, and light. The kind of laughter that doesn't come with a catch in the throat. I'm not lonely, I said after a while, watching a bee hover, then give up. I was lonelier when I was surrounded by people who saw me as a resource instead of a person. Ruth didn't nod, didn't pity. She just passed me another too-dry muffin like it was an answer. Later that evening, I sat down with the trust documents again. The air in the house didn't feel cold anymore, and I hadn't adjusted the thermostat. I crossed out Daniel's name, then Rachel's. In the new space, I wrote Avery M. Ellis, Ruth's daughter, the one who never asked for anything, only showed up with groceries and a car that rattled. She once fixed the latch on my back gate without a word and left a note saying, "Didn't want you to trip." I also added a line to establish a scholarship one for trade students. Thomas would have liked that. He always said we needed more welders and fewer consultants who didn't know how to fix a doorknob. I signed my name, dated the document, and slid it back into the folder. That night, I turned on the porch light not because anyone was coming, but because I wanted to see the glow from the window as I passed. It felt like something was finally mine again. Something they hadn't touched. The next morning, my phone rang. Daniel's name again. I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was short, but I could hear it in his voice. Strained. Not angry tight like something held back too long. I didn't call back. He tried again the next morning. This time I picked up. "Mom," he started too quickly. "Listen, I know things have been tense, but Rachel lost her job last week. There's a gap before her severance hits, and we're not sure we can make the mortgage." I stayed quiet. He cleared his throat. "Do you think you could help?" Just until things stabilize, I could almost picture him rehearsing it, going over the wording with Rachel, deciding this was the least offensive version of the ask. "I'm not on that house anymore, Daniel," I said calmly. "You had me removed from the deed 3 years ago. Said it was cleaner that way." There was a long pause. I heard him exhale like the truth had caught him off guard. "You didn't have to bring that up," he muttered. "I'm just asking for some help." I leaned against the counter, watching the steam rise from my kettle. "I raised you to survive," I said. "I went without so you could have what you needed. Now you have the opportunity to prove it." He didn't respond. I didn't wait. I ended the call before he could turn the silence into something sharp. Afterward, I stood in the kitchen for a while, holding the edge of the table. Not from anger, not even from sadness, just to feel something solid. They didn't miss me. They missed the comfort I provided. The invisible net I kept beneath them without ever being asked. I went to the cupboard, pulled out my favorite mug, and filled it with hot water. No tea bag, just heat. Simple, steady. Outside, Ruth's daughter was unloading groceries at her mother's porch. She waved. I waved back. That night, I put a note on the inside of my front door. "Use what you have first." The man from the hardware store arrived just after noon. It took him 15 minutes to replace the thermostat. This one was simple. No Wi-Fi, no passcode, no app. Just a dial and the warmth it promised. I thanked him, paid in cash, and saw him out. Afterward, I tied on my apron and baked a loaf of bread, not to impress anyone, not for a holiday, not because someone was coming, just because I felt like the kitchen deserved to smell like comfort again. When it was done, I wrapped it in a clean towel and walked it over to Ruth's. She opened the door with a smile and called her daughter out to join us. We sat on the porch slicing bread and watching the light shift across the sidewalk. No talk of bills or balance sheets, just the quiet rhythm of lives that weren't trying to take anything from each other. When I got home, the house greeted me in stillness. There were no missed calls, no new texts. The silence wasn't empty this time. It felt earned. I went to the cabinet and pulled out the file box I'd kept tucked under the stairs. The one with insurance policies, birth certificates, the last postcard Thomas ever sent me. I slid in the updated trust papers. The ink was barely dry, but it already felt like something long overdue. I labeled the box with one word: now. Not someday. Not if. Just now. Later, I turned the thermostat up one notch. A small click, followed by the soft hum of heat returning to the vents. I made a cup of chamomile and carried it to the armchair by the front window. As I sat, the house creaked around me, timbers settling pipes, shifting old bones, adjusting to the season. It didn't sound like loneliness. It sounded like something that belonged to me again. Outside, the porch light cast a quiet glow over the walkway. I didn't expect visitors, but if they came, I'd answer the door on my terms.